The marijuana surge, opportunities and risks on the day when recreational marijuana goes legal in Canada. I am here in New York at MedMen. I'll tell you all about that to dig into this huge business and cultural trend. Now, I am the least qualified person in New York City to talk about marijuana, but I can ask questions. So I have got some of the most qualified people here with me in Midtown on 5th Avenue at MedMen. Danny Danko, he is senior editor at High Times Magazine. Even I've heard of High Times Magazine. It immediately came to mind when I was like, who are we going to talk to about the implications of this? He's the author of Cannabis, A Beginner's Guide to Growing Marijuana. And joining us from the West Coast, Adam Bierman. He is MedMen Enterprises CEO. This is a business valued in the billions of dollars. MedMen has been acquiring other companies to take advantage of what is a global phenomenon that is really shifting the culture. So both of you, thanks for being with me. Thanks for having me here at MedMen. Danny, first of all, did you think we would see this day? We're here on 5th Avenue in this 2,000 square foot space. It's a very nice store. Something like this costs about $1 million a year before you're even paying employees to occupy, and it's about marijuana. Did you see this coming?
You know, it's something we dreamed about, and it was a dream and a fantasy, but it's become real. So on this historic and monumental occasion, as you know, a major developed nation has legalized cannabis, it's absolutely historic and amazing, and it's something to celebrate.
And Adam, as you look at what's coming out of Canada today and kind of positioning your business based on how things develop, what are you hearing? What are you thinking? What are you going to be watching to see exactly how this is taking hold as recreational use in Canada becomes a legitimate thing?
Yeah, it's less about, you know, what we're watching for. I think we fully expect things to happen the way that I know that they will end up happening, which is marijuana is now legal in the country of Canada, and everything's going to be okay. In fact, everything's going to be better. You know, the legalization of marijuana makes the world a safer, healthier, happier place. And that's been proven, you know, time after time as we've, you know, iteratively moved towards the end of prohibition here in the United States. And we're getting a front row seat to the preview of our own movie. And that's, you know, that's what we're watching for, right? This is so cool that on this day, the first time ever a G8 nation has legalized cannabis. We get to see what it looks like. It's our neighbor to the north, and, you know, the end of prohibition for us here down in the United States isn't far behind.
Now, Danny, this is already a big business, but it hasn't been as above ground as many would hope. What changes now, and what do you see in terms of the types of businesses that are scaling up? Here at MedMen, we've got this display on the wall that says, it's got stoner crossed out and says grandmother, forget stoner, MedMen. This is a different sort of look and branding for what this industry is all about, right?
Right. Well, that's the thing, is people from all walks of life consume cannabis. It's not just the typical person people think of based on some type of stereotype. It's really everyone all around us, members of our families and seniors and veterans and people of all walks of life. And what changes is now these Canadian companies are poised to do really well in this industry because they can do the banking that's necessary, and they have the federal legislation that's necessary to actually do proper business.
Culturally, what changes? I mean, you travel around the world. You're a connoisseur. You're a cultural ambassador for this business, for this industry. What in that do you see changing? Is there a taboo that's going away?
Absolutely.
What's happening?
There's a stigma, and that stigma remains. Obviously, here in the States and still in Canada, they're expunging people's criminal records now, but the stigma remains. People are still getting raided. People are still having their being separated from their children, having their dogs shot, losing the right to get a transplant, losing their place on a transplant list. So there are serious real-world repercussions to marijuana prohibition. And every place that legalizes changes that, and those are injustices that won't be continuing to occur.
Adam, tell me about the evolution of MedMen. You started out in this business, I believe, with a partner in dispensaries and grew from there. What was your vision from the beginning, and at what point did this really accelerate into something bigger than individual locations?
Well, I think, the MedMen story runs parallel to the story of the end of prohibition for cannabis here in the U.S. When we started this business over 8 years ago, that was the vision. The vision was that, cannabis was a consumer product, cannabis as a consumer product, back to safer, healthier, happier, giving people the opportunity, destigmatizing cannabis, welcoming people into this world and giving them the opportunity to replace other things that they're accessing now, whether they be, pharmaceutical or alcohol. With marijuana, it allows people to live their best lives. And so I think that, the vision has always been that it will take time. It won't happen overnight. But as a business, if we built proper infrastructure and have the right team and the systems to go do it, and we were, willing to make bold moves like the Fifth Avenue store you're sitting in, that's a medical marijuana market. That's,
Tell me,
yeah, go ahead.
Tell me about that, because this is, correct me if I'm wrong here, but doing the calculation, 2,000 square feet on Fifth Avenue, that's at least $1 million a year. There's a sign here on the table that says there are no marijuana products on display. What's the idea? Because right now, marijuana, not cannabis, not federally legal in the U.S. This is a bet you're placing on the future and maybe staying a step ahead of future competitors? What's the strategy here?
Yeah, and it's not about future competitors. Look, we want everybody to be successful. All the people that are participating on the commercial side of this industry, there's nobody bigger fans than we are, right? We're building an industry while we build a company. In the store that you're in, right, it's not about competitors. It's about showing the world. Look what's happening today as you broadcast from that store. We're showing the world what legal cannabis can look like. We're showing politicians what legal cannabis can look like as we move towards the end of prohibition. We're showing doctors and physicians, we're showing communities, we're showing grandmas, we're showing working people, we're showing everybody, tourists. Think about New York and the reason Fifth Avenue and that store is so important. We're showing people from all over the world. We're letting them have an experience with legal cannabis, and when they leave that experience, the stigma has, dissipated or gone away altogether, right? They've been welcomed into this new world. I like to look at it as, living in black and white and living in color. We're welcoming people into the world in color. And, that future is not too distant, right? The end of prohibition here is coming. In a store like the one you're in or any of the stores that we have across the country, they're built for that, right? And so, it's really as much about building an industry as it is about building MedMen.
Danny, tell me about some of the products that we see represented in the display here. Not exactly on display, but represented in. When I was growing up, people were talking about smoking and maybe some edibles. But here we've got pens, we've got, there's some pills, there's some bottles. Well, what has this industry evolved into? There are even different levels of product. There's a display how to shop at MedMen, and it's not just all about one thing you're looking for.
Absolutely. So much has changed with the prohibition ending and all of the science that has now entered into the equation, and we're doing lab testing and finding out that there are compounds within cannabis, such as CBD, cannabidiol, that are very helpful in reducing inflammation and all kinds of other symptoms that people have. So the ratio of THC to CBD is very important when you're looking for a medical dosage. And what you have here is a variety of different dosages for different ailments and different instances, like to go to sleep for people with insomnia.
I'm gonna reach back
right?
Here.
And so there's all kinds of different developments that have happened. And as marijuana becomes more legal, or as cannabis prohibition begins to crumble, we're having the labs and the medical testing being done to find out what's really what these compounds are all about.
And just for example, I know you can't read this, those who are watching, but up at the top here, you have wellness, and these are ratios. A pure CBD ratio that optimizes health benefits and provides body relaxation with minimal cognitive side effects. And there's a range. On the bottom, you've got sleep. I guess this is the strong stuff. 100 to 1 THC to CBD ratio that provides a relaxing and sedative effect with higher cognitive side effects and better suited for nighttime use. What are the range of different situations where people might be coming in for medical use, picking at the top or at the bottom?
I mean, there are so many different, symptoms and ailments that different compounds in cannabis can treat. That it's pretty endless. It's pretty amazing what people are able to treat, including symptoms of chemotherapy, and because obviously people joke about the munchies, but when you can't eat or you can't keep food down, something like the munchies that people joke about has huge medicinal benefits with very little side effects. So, and even the sleeping, tinctures and things, these are things you wake up from. There's no overdose for cannabis. There's no, and there's so many, this dovetails with so many other issues as far as reducing crime and, helping veterans and, devoting police resources to actual violent criminals, which I think is pretty amazing.
Adam, tell us a bit about the work behind this, the testing that went into figuring out each of these different levels and how you present that information to the customer who walks in these doors.
Well, first of all, to the credit of the state of New York, as that program's evolved and the Department of Health, which oversees the program, I mean, it's required, right? And when I talk about safer, healthier, happier, those three kind of key components as we look at, the betterment of the world that legal marijuana brings, that safer part is really part and parcel what you're talking about, right? Legal cannabis is something that will be overseen by whatever department in whatever state oversees it. In New York, it's Department of Health, and they require, substantial testing, arduous testing. It even sometimes it makes it hard to do business, but that's okay. That's what we want to be doing. We want to be providing people something that is, tested, that is stamped, that they can access and they know what they're getting. Because here's the bottom line on cannabis. People have been using cannabis for thousands of years, and they'll continue to use it for thousands of more, whether it's legal or it's not, right? And so making it legal, right, we are making the world a safer place because you're allowing people to access something in a lawful manner with all the protections that come with that. The other thing that I'd love to mention on the medical side is, we're really trying to start shifting the narrative away from recreational versus medical. From a political standpoint, there are states that have recreational marijuana. Canada's legalized recreational marijuana now, and there are other states like New York that's medical. For us, it's all about wellness, right? Marijuana as a product is a wellness product. It allows people to live their best lives. There is a place for pharma in all of this, and I think that's a really important aspect. But outside of that, everything else that we're talking about here really does fit under that wellness category for MedMen.
All right, the evolution of the branding of cannabis, marijuana, etc. Adam Bierman, the CEO of MedMen Enterprises. Thanks for being with us from out on the West Coast. Danny Danko is going to stay with us. Once again, this is Fortt Knox, Rich Ideas and Powerful People. We are live on 5th Avenue in Midtown, New York at MedMen. This is a store that's focused on cannabis, 2,000 square feet. That's going to cost somebody at least $1 million a year. This is big business, big bets being placed on the day when recreational use of marijuana goes legal in Canada. And we are streaming on Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. Joining us now, joining the conversation, Kate Rogers of CNBC. Kate, you got experience covering this. It wasn't too many days ago. I remember seeing you among quite a few leafy plants.
Hi, John. That's right. Yeah, I did get to take a trip to Canada in September to kind of talk to people within the industry ahead of that recreational legalization date. There I am in that lovely hairnet. So we talked to a company called Oxley. They have 14 different operations, and they basically want to create a consumer packaged goods brand that controls everything from the way the plant is grown, packaged, and then sold to people. And, everyone there was really, really excited about today, obviously, but they're also looking ahead to next year when things like edibles, which are so popular in California, Colorado, Washington, et cetera, those will hit the market in Canada then and hopefully drive up sales even more for people who are really betting big in the space.
Danny, how did you first become sort of an expert in this field? At what age did the spark first become lit, so to speak?
Well, I've been involved in cannabis since a pretty very young age, in the underground, and really there was so much risk involved in those days, and to see where we've come now, it's pretty amazing. And one of the things that I'm the senior cultivation editor at High Times, so we encourage people to grow their own cannabis as well. And one of the interesting things about this Canadian law is that it does allow for 4 plants per household. So nobody's going to get rich growing 4 plants, but you can actually grow a couple of pounds a year, which is more than enough for most, people who are, daily cannabis users.
So 4 plants per household.
That's right.
I'm sure you studied this. Tell me how this works. Does that mean like 4 plants at any one time? So can you have them on different schedules? I mean,
well, it means you can get a grow tent or a grow box and basically start some seedlings or clones that you can pick up from, some of these companies that are going to emerge out of this industry, and some that are already there. And you can grow your own plants, either from seed or clone. Those 4 plants, in 3 months or so, you can grow them and flower them and harvest them, and you can make edibles with them and all the other, ancillary products that come out of cannabis.
How has this changed the world for High Times? I imagine it might have gone from sort of an underground publication to an industry trade magazine.
Right. Well, we're looking to go public right now. We're going, public. They're collecting investments as we speak. So it has changed a lot. And, like I said, we encourage people to cultivate, and there's going to be a lot of that going on. I think people are very worried about the corporate takeover of cannabis. And I think one of the, simple ways that you can sort of pull yourself out of that equation is just to create your own, or work with friends that create it for themselves and for others.
Kate, as you were both telling people here in the U.S. about your travels and what you're covering, and then talking to people out in Canada as they were gearing up for this day, what was the sense? What were you hearing? Were you hearing any reservations or fears about what this would bring? Were you I'm getting a lot of sly jokes? I don't know. I'm wondering just kind of what the pulse is in this moment.
Well, I've been covering the space for about 4 years, and just watching it grow, pun intended, over that time period has really been interesting. I mean, I've seen it go from not illegitimate, but taken less seriously, I think, to actually people really respecting the entrepreneurial aspect of what this space has to offer. I mean, we're now at 30 states in D.C. for medicinal use in the U.S., 9 states in D.C. for recreational use. We have a few important ballot measures, including Michigan and North Dakota coming up in midterms. Also, people talking about New York and New Jersey legalizing for recreational use. And I think Canada taking this huge step, many analysts that I spoke to said it will only help to further legitimize the industry and potentially move the needle a little bit quicker than anticipated here in the States. I mean, there was even talk about President Trump looking at this issue again after midterm, so we'll definitely have to wait and see what happens. But I did want to follow up on one thing that Danny mentioned, just about the commercial takeover of cannabis. I know many people don't necessarily want that to happen, but don't you think that also helps to legitimize the industry and make things like banking, for example, hopefully get a little bit easier as we see large multinational companies either getting in the space or expressing interest? Do you think that could be a potential good thing as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's inevitable, right? I mean, any industry, if you look at the end of alcohol prohibition, for instance, it wasn't the mom and pops who flourished, it was larger companies that came in. But we have the option still to brew our own beer and, for ourselves, right, without selling it to other people. And I think, what's interesting about Canada is that they're allowing this, and it's an experiment that we're all going to be able to see. And if it's anything like the other experiments we've had in Colorado, in California, and Oregon, even Uruguay, you're going to see that any kind of fears that people had are unfounded. And not only that, but it's a benefit. It creates jobs, it helps the economy, it reduces crime. The opiate abuse and alcohol abuse and DUIs, all of those things go down when you legalize cannabis. So.
Danny, how much of the cannabis industry, of marijuana, the pot business, do you expect to go legit? Even in a place like Canada, right, as you look at the industry and the ways that people acquire it and the ways, the stigma that exists and is fading, but it's going to be around for a while no matter what, how much of that's going to go above ground?
Right. I mean, that's the thing is with the overregulation that you get when you have an industry that's emerging like this, you have very serious regulation, and it varies from state to state and province to province. And that regulation and that taxation, in some cases, leads people back to the black market or to the gray market. And so I think the important thing is that, this is an herb. It's a flower that grows. It's not, something that has to be processed in a laboratory and all of that. So, people can create it. It's not, you don't need fields and fields or acres and acres to make it. And so I think it is important that people understand that as well, that it's more like a vegetable than it is like a pharmaceutical.
Right, except people probably enjoy it more than most vegetables.
That's right, but the cost is, what I mean to say is that the cost of it is in the risk. The reason people were paying $300 or $400 for an ounce of cannabis is because of the risks that people took to get that to market.
Right.
But in the absence of that risk, it really costs very little to produce. And so I think, there's the big sort of, rush to market right now, but, people are going to come to find out. And we have in other states where there's been overproduction and a glut that, there has to be ways of dealing with that as well, which our industry has never seen.
Yeah. Once again, this is Fortt Knox. We are at MedMen Medical Dispensary in Midtown Manhattan on 5th Avenue. I'm here with Danny Danko, the senior editor. Now, it's cultivation editor also at High Times. Kate Rogers has been with us from CNBC headquarters in Inglewood Cliffs. And right now I want to bring in Deirdre Bosa from Canada. It's where it's all happening today in Newfoundland. Am I pronouncing that right, Deirdre? Newfoundland? That's what I was taught, but I'm American. You're Canadian. You can tell me these things. Newfoundland? Okay, good. I was taught correctly.
Bang on. And let me tell you, I've heard a lot of different ways in the last few days.
Not Newfoundland. But tell me what you've been seeing there as the clock struck midnight, as stores begin to open and people begin to come into this new era there of legal recreational use of cannabis.
Well, John, it's been wild. I mean, first of all, the weather has been crazy. It's sunny right now. There were huge storms last night, huge gusts of wind. But you know what? That did not stop hundreds of... This is one of about 100 licensed retail cannabis stores that are opening up across the country today. And because we're on the very east coast of Canada, because of the time change, the clock struck midnight first here. So there was a huge celebration. And take a look at this first sale.
3, 2, 1.
John, I love watching that video because there's a real sense of pride here in Canada. Everyone we're talking to says that this is a historic moment. Many people never ever thought that they would see this in their lifetime. So there's a lot of celebrating here, and there's been a steady stream of people throughout the day, and we're in Newfoundland, but across the country, some of the celebrations are just getting underway, particularly in the West, which is known for its pot production.
Now, we've got, stylish wooden tables there. We've got, well-designed shopping bags. This isn't like a dark basement, not a puff of smoke in sight. This could be an iPhone launch, that we were watching video of.
I've heard.
What does that say? What does that say about the image that this industry is setting up that's perhaps different from the image that most people have had of cannabis, marijuana, pot? Everybody's saying cannabis nowadays. Nobody's saying pot. I mean, there's been a wholesale change in the elements of this business that are being emphasized in the culture.
Absolutely. You have high-profile business people, politicians. When you talk about the stigma that it still has, a lot of that truly is gone in Canada. I mean, some will always remain, but the majority of the population has been in support of legalizing the recreational use of cannabis for a long time. So this was a long time coming, which is why there have been so many celebrations. And you're right about the store. These are very nice places. I've heard people say that it looks like an Apple Genius, but I've heard that it looks like a Banana Republic or a J. Crew or a Lululemon store. So it's not necessarily what you'd expect. But I will also tell you this, John. I spoke to a lot of people on the line, and some people don't believe me on this. I spoke to people on the line yesterday. I said, why are you here? Are you going to continue to buy from these licensed retail stores? And a bunch of people said, not really. We're here for the novelty because this is a proud moment. But I'm going to go back to my dealer because the product is cheaper and it's better there. So, whether this eliminates the black market, very unlikely, at least at first.
Indeed, Danny, we were just talking about this very question, and that leads me to a question that's going to be on a lot of people's minds. How do we, in this era of legitimizing cannabis, still protect people who are too young to have access to this? To what extent is the industry going to have to do marketing specifically targeted to that and make sure that it's effective? Because we see what's even happening with vape pens these days. If things get out of hand, there can be a backlash.
Right. Well, you know, it's easier for people that are underage to get cannabis on the black market than it is from a licensed dispensary. Obviously, we see that over and over because it's in their best interest to keep that from happening, and they're carding people. And there's different provinces with different ages now in Canada as well, because I think Quebec wants to change that to 21, and some have 18, some have 19. So it is important, but I think that when you have a licensed producer and retailer, it becomes harder for underage kids to get cannabis. So I think that that's important, and I think that the licensed producers and retailers have to be able to compete with the black market, right. And that means they have to create a great product at a good price.
Kate Rogers, jump in here.
Sure, John. I was curious, actually, for Deirdre. When I was there, people were expressing some concerns over potential empty store shelves because of the novelty of it all and because people were so excited and so anticipating this open. Mm-hmm. Have you heard any talk of that? Because people mentioned that to me, and then they also mentioned concerns in years moving forward that potentially a lot of the product being grown would go to the rec market, and then the medicinal market would wind up with a shortage. So are you hearing anything similar on the ground there?
Yes, actually. Hi. People are very nice here in Newfoundland. On both of those points, Kate, actually, supply, we are already seeing supply constraints. Some online stores are selling out of certain varieties. There's huge lineups. So far here at the store in Newfoundland, it seems to be okay. But remember that there's only about 100 stores that have received licenses leading up. Woo! It's going to happen. Excuse me.
They're very friendly there in Canada, I hear.
But you're about they are very friendly. They mean it with love. They mean.
Yes, and Deirdre Bosa, being Canadian, is used to that. We have a little trouble with the shot, so we'll allow the Canadians there to continue to celebrate. Danny, as we head into the rest of the year and looking at various other either states or countries that are looking to make legal moves, what's on your radar?
Right. Well, the industry is moving towards the east in the United States. I mean, we're seeing now we have the whole West Coast, California, Oregon, and Washington have adult use laws, and now Canada. So you can travel now from Alaska all the way down the coast and be in a legal place all the way down. It's basically a third of the country, you know, and that's moving its way east. So Massachusetts is changing. New Jersey has a Governor Murphy who ran on this, and it was really important to them, and that's going to change, and that's going to definitely make changes here in New York, because, you know, we're not going to have people going over to New Jersey from New York for their cannabis. It's going to have to happen here as well, and once it happens here, it's going to happen everywhere.
So we're not going to have that? Is that just a cultural, you know, that changes the whole meaning of the bridge and tunnel crowd if people are leaving New York to get cannabis in New Jersey? I mean, come on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think we want to miss out on the revenue. I don't think we want to miss out on the jobs. I don't think we want to miss out on the reduction in crime. And just like they said earlier, it's if you replace alcohol and opiates and things like that in your life with cannabis, you will live a longer life. There's not a doctor in the world who can deny that. There's not a politician who can deny that. And that's a fact. And cannabis is the future. And if you don't like it, you're not going to be very happy with the way things are going.
I'm sure we can find a few who would deny it, but your point is well taken. Danny Danko, thank you for being with us. Kate Rogers, Deirdre Bosa, thank you for your reporting and perspective. This has been Fort Knox, rich ideas, powerful people, and today, big day in Canada with recreational use of cannabis going legal. We'll see what the cultural implications are across the board. Thanks for being with us.